Did you know that only about 4% of staff and faculty working in academia identify as disabled? Only 4% of healthcare practitioners identify as disabled. And actually less than 1.5% of employed lawyers identify as disabled. I'm Annette Bourbonniere from Nothing Without Us, Stories and Discussions of Meaningful Inclusion. If you like the work I'm doing, please subscribe to this podcast, drop me a like, write in some comments, and tell your friends. This will help me keep this podcast going. Even though more than 1 in 4 persons in the United States identifies as disabled, representation of people with disabilities in professional ranks is extremely low. We are seriously underrepresented. This significant underrepresentation of the disabled population in these and other professions has several causes that can and should be addressed. One is how hard it is to prepare for a professional life. Academia has a lot of barriers for people with disabilities, and I'm talking campuses nationwide with physical barriers of doors, elevators, lots and lots of steps. In academia, providing accommodations is not a smooth process. Even students who are given accommodations letters are rebuffed by some faculty who don't want to use particular technologies or have decided they just don't need to give accommodations. Another barrier is the ableist attitude that some faculty hold that persons with disabilities cannot do the things they've signed up to do. They can't go on field trips, they can't do this, they can't do that. Well, in today's world, we have so much technology that can remove so many of these barriers. That attitude should be not that you can't do it, but more, what do we need to do to help you do it? This is also a symptom of the chicken and egg problem, because in order to have students prepared to be faculty, the kind that would not set up such barriers, and rise to leadership positions, first have to get through the barriers of current faculty who do not understand disability. So it is a real challenge, and one that is going to take a while to resolve. I hope we're working on it. The second issue, and by the way, these are not in order of importance, but more just trying to get them all on the list. It's a reluctance to identify as disabled. The Americans with Disabilities Act is almost 35 years old, and discrimination toward persons with disabilities in employment is still an issue. Not all concerns about self-identification are because of the employer, but also because discrimination is still so prevalent, there's the fear of the discrimination that could happen once self-identification takes place. And there is an emotional toll to that fear and to the discrimination itself that we go through. And most people don't realize how really challenging that is. Some of us, and I'm definitely on that list, don't have to make a choice about identification because my disability is obvious. When I roll into the room, nobody has to wonder. For some, the issue, though, is not straightforward. The question becomes more of when to disclose rather than if. And people with disabilities are concerned that identifying as disabled may prevent them from getting the job. On the other hand, if you don't identify as disabled and then turn around and ask for accommodations after being hired, you can create a distrust between yourself and your employer, who may feel blindsided about not being told about the disability in the first place. So, while you are not required to make note of the disability during the hiring process, it may prevent problems down the road. And besides, I always think if you're really worried that the employer is going to discriminate against you when you disclose, maybe that's not an employer you're going to want to work with anyway. There may be a better one. But then I'm self-employed, so what can I tell you there? So discrimination is a valid concern. Another issue that employers note is they don't know how to recruit people with disabilities since they are not allowed to ask people if they are disabled. And I hear this a lot from employers who have federal contracts and they need to comply with Section 503 of the Rehabilitation Act, which requires them to, continually reach out to disability communities to hire them, and also they have to document their recruitment efforts. So I usually recommend that their recruiting materials contain a statement that persons with disabilities are encouraged to apply. And then the other thing I recommend is that they reach out to organizations that support professionals with disabilities. Oops. They don't know what organizations do that. I have to admit, after spending hours searching on Google for appropriate organizations, this is a valid concern. There are numerous professional organizations organized both by profession and by demographic groups. For example, if you want an economist, you can go to the American Economics Association. There are specific websites for recruiting in academia, or architects, engineers. I mean, there are many groups where you can go to recruit professionals in professions, in various professions. And you can locate professionals in demographic groups. There are groups like Young Gay Professionals, Black Women in Academia, and many more. But there is a real hitch when you're trying to find groups that are disabled people working in professions. The search for groups of disabled professionals will almost always bring you to organizations of professionals serving people with disabilities. Not the same thing. Apparently, Google doesn't even think that some of us could actually work in professional lives, work in professions. So there are some professions that do have some groups, but you have to go through each profession in order to find them. So even then, some organizations that claim to be groups of professionals with disabilities don't have job boards or even allow direct communication about employment. This is the case when searching for academics with disabilities, as well as numerous other groups. There are some that are very clearly better at this. The American Chemical Society has a subcommittee for chemists with disabilities, and that has existed for a fairly long time. I've been aware of it for more than 20 years. Yeah. So I could find two groups, two organizations for physicians with disabilities, and I found one for healthcare professionals with disabilities. But other professions do not have them, nor is there any general job board for professionals with disabilities on those that have them. I'm not going to say never, but I take that back. There are not many that have job boards for professionals with disabilities. And so it makes it hard for you to be able to recruit from those organizations. So, to all my fellow professionals with disabilities, it's on us to fix that. Yes, we need to socialize, organize, create such organizations. We could start with general organizations for professionals with disabilities. This would give everyone an opportunity to network, create contacts that lead to the types of employment we desire. These organizations should also have highly publicized job boards. Let the world know that we are capable, that we have qualified people in our ranks who can do the jobs they're looking to have done. We can also encourage professional organizations for our own professions to have a branch for persons with disabilities with the job board. This is on us. We want to be recruited for professional jobs, so we need to help recruiters know where to find us. We then need to rise to leadership positions in our places of employment or in our professions, so we can influence change. Take away the excuse. I regularly tell people with disabilities that we do not have to disclose, but we cannot represent and create change unless we do. So let's make it happen. Thank you for listening. I'm Annette Bourbonniere from Nothing Without Us, Stories and Discussions of Meaningful Inclusion. If you like my podcast, please subscribe and drop me a like and drop me a comment. Tell your friends. It will help make this podcast grow, and that's something I would really like to see happen. I'm aiming for 1,000 members by the end of the first quarter of 2025. So please help me with that. In the meantime, you can tell your friends that they can find me on patreon.com. They can also find me on YouTube, Spotify, and other audio listings, audio platforms. And you can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky. So thank you so much for listening. Till the next Nothing Without Us, I'm Annette Bourbonniere.